So before I go into too much about WELLERP specifically, WELLERP is the acronym, I wanted to give a little bit of kind of the context of the reservation because it has a lot to do with sort of why WELLERP was formed in the first place. So this is Hole in the Day. He was kind of one of the negotiators that was working on the treaty that I guess was ratified or came together in 1867. And the treaty created the White Earth Reservation, and a lot of folks that were I guess signatories to that treaty kind of migrated from different places throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin to come and live on the reservation. White Earth is kind of an interesting case in the US because unlike a lot of other reservations as well as reserves here in Canada, it was designed to succeed under kind of white assimilationist understandings of what success means. So really prime agricultural land, a lot of forestry opportunities, things that I guess the colonizers wanted White Earth Anishinaabe to take up as livelihood generating activities were all really present on the reservation. But one of the big issues was that early on in kind of the migration movement to White Earth, they started doing allocations of land based on an individual basis. So people would get 160 acres of land allocated to them as an individual rather than the whole reservation being allocated to the tribe. And so what ended up happening was a lot of folks would sell off their land to kind of private landowners. So now somewhere between 60 and 70%, a really high percentage of the White Earth Reservation is actually privately owned by white farmers. So in this context, WELLERP was founded in part to recover some of that land. So a lot of what they do is kind of, buying up land as it becomes available, taking donations from farmers that are no longer using that land, and working to recover those as well as hopefully transfer it to the tribe eventually. So in addition to that land recovery piece, that really concrete land recovery piece, another part of that is cultural revitalization and language revitalization. So I want to go over some of the projects that they've been involved in that kind of strain. So one of the big ones is protecting Minomen, which is the wild rice. Part of the creation story of the White Earth Anishinaabe is that they were told by the Creator that the place where they should live is where the food grows on the water. And so wild rice is very, very important to them culturally. But it has come under threat over the last few decades to genetic modification. There's a lot of scientific research going on at the University of Minnesota to try to patent a genetically modified form of wild rice. And there was a threat over the course of many years that that rice would be introduced to this natural environment and really put the natural wild rice that is so important to them at risk. So WELLERP was really, really involved in resisting that and has made a lot of movement to build a better relationship with the University of Minnesota so that that won't happen and that their treaty rights to be able to harvest rice will be respected. They also do, so part of this kind of cultural revitalization bit is working on food sovereignty. So they have a farm. This is a picture of a corn pollination workshop that I got to attend while I was there. So they're working on recovering a lot of native varieties of corn, as well as beans and squash. Beans not necessarily from exactly that region, but still ones that thrive really well in this kind of northern environment. So yeah, they're working on recovering Bear Island flint and are working on kind of collecting seeds so that members of the White Earth Nation can grow those once again and have that connection to that really important cultural food that is so critical to their identity. So another way that they kind of make sure that those seeds are distributed, I guess, is about a year or two ago, they started the White Earth Regional Seed Library. So this is kind of a picture, it's just in a room in the back of the office in Callaway. But members of the White Earth Nation can come to this library and take out seeds and grow them in their own gardens. And it kind of works like a regular library. You borrow the seeds, and you grow them out, and hopefully you do seed saving at the end of the season if the crop goes well, and then you can bring them back to the library. So it makes a really diversified and strong, resilient kind of seed because it's being grown out in so many areas of the reservation and under so many kind of techniques as different people add their various knowledges to how to grow that seed. They also started the very first tribal farm-to-school program in the U.S. That was a few years ago. So now there's a lot of youth on the White Earth Reservation whose schools serve local and sometimes wild foods in their school cafeterias. There's also a lot of education projects to work with families and children to, I guess, share knowledge about those traditional and wild foods that are really important to them. So this is a bunch of kids, I think, are making corn husk dolls at one of the family education days. They're also really involved in network building, not only kind of on the reservation, but around Turtle Island as a whole, really. So my first introduction to WELLERP was at this Indigenous farming conference that they host every year in March, where Indigenous farmers from all over the place come and share their knowledges, do workshops, and it's a really important momentum building place, I think, and it's a place where a lot of really cool initiatives have been born out of the relationships that come from that farming conference. And then another big important thing was they started Native Harvest, which is a business, I guess, that kind of buys up harvested or food products that are harvested by folks on the White Earth Nation, so a lot of rice, a lot of maple syrup, that kind of thing, and they process it and kind of sell it to a wider market. So that kind of generates income for folks on the reservation as well as income for WELLERP itself. So you can go to the Native Harvest website and actually order a bunch of different kinds of products that come from the reservation. So what was I actually involved in at White Earth this summer? So I had kind of two main things that I was working on. One was a food shed mapping project. So the White Earth Nation while I was there, kind of launched this process that they want to engage in around food shed mapping. So basically what that means is they're trying to assess kind of where the reservation is in terms of meeting its food sovereignty goals. So at the very first meeting for this food shed mapping kind of working group, we had a physical map that you see there, and we kind of went through a series of questions like what kind of rice processing facilities do we have? Do we have community kitchens? Do we have root cellars? Do we have all these different kinds of pieces that make up a food system as we know it, and just sort of physically put them down on a map. And what that does is it both gives a sense of what kind of infrastructure exists, as well as where do they need to go to be able to further their goals in terms of achieving food sovereignty. So part of that involved kind of researching what other communities in the US have done to go through with a food shed mapping process, as well as kind of reporting back to the working group and documenting, I guess, next steps for them to go through with. The other big project was looking at Anishinaabe food systems. So this one was kind of fun. You know, the Canada Food Guide or the USDA food pyramid kind of has a really laid out version of sort of what people should be eating as part of their daily diet throughout the year. So my mentor, Bob, had this idea of wanting to kind of reform that to be more relevant for Anishinaabe folks. So kind of looking at more of a seasonal way of eating, because traditionally, folks didn't always eat the same things at different times of the year. It was dependent on what was available, what you preserved from previous seasons, all that kind of thing. And also food kind of went with cultural activities. Food and culture are not separated. We came up with this cool image that unfortunately I don't have a picture of because the project isn't quite complete, but it will be soon, of a food turtle. So it's basically a turtle shell, and it has kind of seasonal activities that go along the outer edge, and then different kinds of foods that would be eaten at different times of the year in conjunction with those activities. So hopefully that will be turned into a poster as well as a website. I also got to do a couple interviews with elders on some of the different foods that are present in this food turtle, and those were audio recorded and will go up on the website once it's launched. So just in addition to kind of those projects, I also felt like I had a lot of opportunities that were really cool to just engage with the community in different ways. So I hung out a lot in the garden. This is me pollinating a squash, and then the little one in the top is my squash a few weeks later. Very proud squash mama. And I also got to do a lot of things with Native Harvest. So for instance, they had a food stand at the powwow, and I was serving up some Three Sisters soup and some hominy bacon soup and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of stuff with Native Harvest. Attending a Wild Food Summit. There was elections, so I went to the Tribal Council inauguration, and just a lot of cool things happening at White Earth this summer. So I was really, happy to be a part of it, and I learned so much from this organization. So, Jimmy Quich, and if there's any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Kaitlyn. And I actually, all of the students, we got to try some of the wild rice from White Earth that Kaitlyn prepared the other day, and it was delicious. And my 2-year-old son devoured the rest of it. So, any question?
Yeah, so seeing as the corporations are one of the leading individuals or the leading threats, and I guess in my opinion, to Indigenous foods, I'll throw you a hard one and you can just pass if you want. Any thoughts, or was there discussions about the role of university funding from corporations that are involved in some of the trying to appropriate and copyright various foods and the problems that causes? So you have Indigenous peoples and you have institutions of learning. Any thoughts or comments or discussions that happened there that you are willing to make publicly?
Contentious. Well, I guess I can at least speak a little bit to the issue with Manoomin and the University of Minnesota, which was that their research actually started back in the 1950s, and they were not involving White Earth folks or any of the other reservations in northern Minnesota that really depend on wild rice harvesting at all in their research and their conversations, and we're really just sort of powering through this, thinking that developing some kind of form of rice that could be patented and released would be beneficial because it makes profit, I guess. But I think that it does speak to kind of an evolution of university and First Nations relationships in some ways, that WELLERP and folks at White Earth, as well as other Anishinaabe in the northern Minnesota region, have been able to build stronger relationships with that university so that it both stopped the genetic modification from going through, as well as created different opportunities for engaging with multiple knowledges on wild rice. So for instance, there's I think a gathering that happens maybe every couple of years on Manoomin, hosted by the University of Minnesota, involving Indigenous peoples from that area, as well as scientific researchers. There's a lot of students that have been involved at the University of Minnesota that have come down and made an effort to learn from White Earth folks, as well as folks at other reservations, on kind of the importance of Manoomin for them, and have brought those ideas back to the university. So I think that, it speaks to the importance of kind of building trust and personal relationships between, institutions and First Nations. There's a long way to go, but I think that this example is actually a really positive example in how those relationships have changed, and so hope that answers a little bit.
Thank you very much, Kaitlyn.